booktube. I'm here with my March wrap up. I'm not as far behind in getting this out, I hope. Farther behind than I wanted to be, but so I'm just doing this unedited, no notes prepared, nothing, just going for it. I'm just going for it. Because otherwise this stuff's not getting done, and that's my thing right now, is that I have to prepare for things, and I'm just like, no, like, just trust yourself that you can remember what these books are about and what you want to say about them. So let's see if I do. So we'll start off with the 3 books that I'm just noticing I'm all over the place here with my wrap up on my computer. So we're gonna do some books that I read in February too, but it was the end of February, so yeah. So we're just gonna start randomly. Here, make sure that there's no other mistakes that need to be corrected here. No, okay. So we can start with Beyond Belief by Elaine Pagels. This was one of my religious texts that I selected for March, and this is about the Gospel of Thomas, which is interesting because after I finished reading it, I actually found a translation of the Gospel of Thomas, so that's pretty cool. So Gospel of Thomas was founded in 1946. It is considered a Gnostic gospel, which too complicated to get into here. But it is possibly another gospel. Yeah, and so it's her telling you about the different translations, actually mostly it's about the origins of the canon of the Bible as well, and why initially, like way back, because we didn't find the text until 1946, but they knew about it 100, 200 years after Jesus died. So they knew about this text, but it was hidden. It was supposed to be destroyed, but it was hidden and found again, thousands of years later. So yeah, so it's about the canon and about the people who started the early Christian church and what they wanted Christianity to be. So it was really, really interesting book. Yeah, I like Elaine Pagels. As an author, I've read lots of her stuff. Then I read The Vinyl Cafe Diaries by Stuart McLean. I love The Vinyl Cafe Diaries. I've read stories here and there from all of them. This one contained one of my favorite stories. I believe it's called Dave and the Duck. It's hilarious. It involves Dave losing his wedding ring and a duck. And let your imagination go from there. So the Vinyl Cafe Diaries follow Dave and Morley, and sometimes their kids too. They have a daughter and a son whose names are escaping me, but Dave and Morley I remember because they're in the majority of the things. And they're just kind of like a normal Canadian couple. He runs a vinyl cafe, like he sells records. That's where the name comes from. Yeah, and they're hilarious short stories. I was laughing my head off reading this. Lots of funny moments. One nitpicking thing I do have to say is that this one is divided into each family sections. We get a story that's supposed to feature Morley and her giving birth, but it's actually all about Dave. That was my only gripe with it. Okay. Then I read Hotline by Dimitri Nasrallah, and this was for Canada Reads this year. I'm glad that this book came across my radar for that. And Hotline is about a woman immigrating from Lebanon during the Lebanese War after the death of her husband with her young son to Montreal, Canada, and her trying to, establish herself and realizing that the promises that were made over in Lebanon are not likely to become a reality once you get to Canada. Yeah, and it's very, we see her struggles, but it ends on this really kind of hopeful note. Yeah, it's just really heart-touching as we're dealing with grief and being an immigrant. Yeah. And I also read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia for Canada Reads, and I'm glad I did too because this book was really cool. Yeah, I was really hesitant to go into it because of its popularity, and I thought it was a YA. It's not. It's adult. And she does the Gothic very well. So this is about a young woman in Mexico. She gets sent off to go check on her cousin. They got a troubling letter from her, and she's newly married. And, like, just go into it blind. Just go into it knowing that, like, that we're following this crazy story. It is so good. It is so good. Yeah. I also read, I'm just going to skip that one and go to Greenwood, because that's also for Canada Reads. Yeah, that's 3 books. 3. Oh, okay, Ducks is in the comics section. I was confused there. Okay, so Greenwood by Michael Christie was also for Canada Reads, and this is a really cool book. So it concentrates on this family history. As I said, family history across generations. And they all kind of center around trees. So, like, the core story, we have, it's like framed. How can I put this? Okay, so the story at the beginning and the end is the story of, like, I think she'd be like okay, so we have the father, and then his kid, and then her kid. So I guess great-granddaughter. So we follow the great-granddaughter, and she's working on a conservation, as, like, stuff is going down in the world. Like, this is, like, special conservation. And then we follow her father's story, and he's a carpenter. And we follow his mother's story, which she's, like a I don't like the word eco-terrorist, but I think, like, that's just gets it across succinctly. And then at the core, we have the story of the people that raised her, her father's story, and they're in the lumber business. Yeah, it's really cool. And, like, there's this nod to, like, the Irvings, which are, like, they own New Brunswick, and they own everything and lots of trees. So yeah, it was good. And then I read Imago by Octavia E. Butler, and I finished a series. So it's it's either called the Xenogenesis or Lilith's Brood series. So the first book is about Earth is going to be destroyed. So these aliens come down and they save humans, and they said, yeah, we'll save you, but here's the hitch, you got to breed with us. Yeah, it sounds more vulgar than that, but it's not. It's to what degree, the first book I think is to what degree can you alter humanity and still be human. And then it gets further on. Imago had a lot of me questioning, because I was like, I don't agree with the alien species necessarily with what they're doing. Has a lot to do with, like, consent as well, relationships and metamorphosis, and, like, it's really not a black and white book. It's very gray. Speaking of gray, I read part 2 of The Grey House by Mariam Petrosyan. I'm taking bigger books and I'm dividing them into chunks each month, so I'm not feeling obligated to read, like, a 700-page book all in one month. I'm just going to read part 1, and, like, it takes a lot of the pressure off. So I read 366 pages of that. And we're getting further into the story. The general premise, it's a very uncanny story. I think uncanny is a good descriptor for it. We follow a group of boys in a boarding house for students with physical disabilities. They're rarely ever in school. Like, I don't think we ever see a classroom scene where there's a teacher teaching. And it's very much about it encapsulates, like, the teenage mindset of black and white thinking, but to such an extreme. And it's also, like, a bit of uncanniness, magical realism. Something eerie is going on in the background. And it's come at this point to the forefront. Even though our main character that we're concentrating mostly on is not, he's in denial that this stuff is happening. It's really quite interesting. I also read Funny Boy by Shyam Selvadurai, and this is, I think it's semi-autobiographical story about a young boy growing up in Sri Lanka, and it's kind of told in, like, different shorter stories, like shorter novellas within it, but we all follow the same character. and he is slowly coming to the realization that he is gay. There's something funny about that boy. Yeah, and at the background too is that there's this war going on between different. I don't know if they're different ethnicities, even different language speakers in Sri Lanka. I got to educate myself more on that. But yeah, there was a civil war going on, or building up to. And yeah, it was really good. I really glad I finally picked it up and was able to read that. Shyam Selvadurai is an immigrant to Canada, so it's kind of cool that he's also Canadian there. I read a lot of Canadian literature, thanks to Canada Reads mostly, but also outside of that. I also read God, A Human History by Reza Aslan. Again, he's another religious writer that I really like. And so this is about how we as humans create God in our image. Is an interesting way to put it. So how we see ourselves in God and how that conflicts or contributes to religion. Yeah. Into comics here, because I think I read quite not as many as I thought. So I read Ducks by Kate Beaton for Canada Reads. Have issues with this. Yeah, it was an interesting story. I think it was more suffered from the way it was presented. Sorry, I have my computer here with my list. Yeah, so it's about a lot of people. If you're from Canada, you know this. A lot of people from the East Coast. There's not a lot of opportunity here economically. So they tend to go more out west. A lot of people go to Ontario. If you happen to be a French-speaking East Coaster, you can go to Montreal. And a lot of people go to Alberta to work in the oil sands. And this is about her personal experience working in the oil sands. And there's a lot of questions about morality, both in environmental issues like oil sands, Indigenous rights to the land. It's the oil sands encroach on Indigenous land, and then misogyny, rape culture up there. I just wanted to clarify something here. The morality issues are not addressed directly in the text. The issues of misogyny and stuff are, but the other issues I raised are not dwelled on. They may be mentioned in passing. These morality issues are more just if you are a well-informed Canadian, you are aware of these issues. So that was my concern. I just wanted to address that these are not addressed, in my opinion, properly in the text. Yeah, I'm just gonna hold a lot of opinions to myself, but I enjoyed it, but the morality of it just irks me wrong. It just rubs me wrong. Okay. Tim Drake. I also read Robin issue number 1 to 6. This is, I think it was 2023 that this was released. And we follow Tim Drake version of Robin as he's trying to separate himself from Batman. So he's going off, he's living on his own. He has a boyfriend, he's creating this community, and his community is being attacked. Yeah, it was entertaining. Good. No complaints. Then I read a bunch of Batman comics. I read Blind Justice. Let's see, I'm trying to separate them all in my mind. Okay, Blind Justice. Is that... No, that's the one where he gets accused. To be honest, I can't remember what Blind Justice is about. So, yeah, I read Batman Blind Justice. Nothing to say about it, apparently. Then I read Night Cries, which is where Batman investigates some child murders. It's very harrowing. I also read Creature of the Night, which is an interesting take on Batman. We follow this young kid who lost his twin brother, and then he's going through some tough times, and he manifests Batman. yeah, it's really interesting take. Creature of the Night. Oh, that's Creature of the Night. That's the one I just talked about. I was like, wait, what's going on? And Last Night on Earth, Batman gets accused of murdering Penguin. Or is that Blind Justice? I can't remember anymore. That's failsafe. Okay, Last Night on Earth. I'm so sorry. I'm all over the place. We're reading a lot of Batman comics. So Last Night on Earth. Batman actually teams up with Joker. That's all I'm gonna say about that one. That one was pretty interesting. Yeah. And then I read a comic called Chimichanga, Sorrow, the World's Worst Face. I didn't know this was volume 2. It was still readable, still understandable. We follow a freak show in a circus, and this young girl tries to recruit this guy who's the ugliest man on earth. And we find out that maybe he's ugly because it's not just on the outside. Yeah, it was very interesting. And then, oh, sorry. I also read Spawn Dark Horror. And again, this was so long ago. I think it was an anthology series. Spawn. Oh, no, Dark Horror. Okay, I remember now. Spawn Dark Horror. We're following his niece. She may be manifesting some powers. And he's trying to hide her from the bad people. That's what that one's about. Yeah, so that is my March wrap-up. Let me know what you read in the month of March. I don't think it's that long ago that we should forget, even though I've obviously forgotten some stuff here. I'm just going to check and see if I had any DNFs in March. I don't write down when I DNF things. Okay. No, I don't think I did. So that's that. Thank you for watching.